Views and opinions expressed in this production are those of the individual and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Shooters Nation or our sponsors. Information provided on this show is not a replacement for legal counsel or professional training. Listener and viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on live shows.
Welcome to the Shooters Nation podcast, the show created for you, the armed citizen. Join our hosts and subject matter experts as we talk about guns and gear, practical training and knowledge, Second Amendment issues, and the firearms culture. Be sure to join us after the show at shootersnation.com and become part of the Shooters Nation.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Shooters Nation podcast. I'm your host, David Yancey, coming to you from our studio just outside Nashville, Tennessee. Today's show is a little weird in the sense that it's just me and you, the listener. So if I seem a little off today, it's because I don't have anybody to talk to other than myself. And contrary to popular opinion, I don't talk to myself all that much. So definitely missing Mark Lancaster. This week is the Shooting, Hunting, Outdoor Trade Show, or SHOT, as everyone's probably more familiar with hearing it called, out in Las Vegas. And Mark's attending that as part of his day job business duties. And, well, I'm not. I'm stuck here at home holding down the fort. But I'm not going to be sad about that, maybe a little jealous, but I hope that Mark has a good time. And, of course, we all hope that he brings back a lot of new things for us to talk about on the next episode. So just to take care of some business before we get going, I want to remind you all that you can connect with us after the show at shootersnation.com. And that's where you can send us feedback and sign up for the Shooters Nation Mail Blast mailing list. You can also follow us on Instagram as @ShootersNationRadio and on Facebook as facebook.com/ShootersNation. While you're on Facebook, be sure to sign up for the Shooters Nation community. That's where you can interact with us, other listeners, and some of our guest subject matter experts. And finally, if you like what you're hearing, you can help support the show and make future episodes possible by becoming a Patreon patron at patreon.com/ShootersNation. And you can help support the show for free by leaving us a positive review on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, etc. When you do that, it helps us rise in the search rankings when people are looking for content similar to this. So today, what I want to talk to you guys about is something that honestly, I think Mark would probably be just fine sitting out on. And I'll be very transparent with you. We had originally decided that we weren't going to record or release an episode this week. And as a matter of fact, I'm releasing this on a day that we're normally not releasing episodes. So if you're wondering what in the world's going on, that's what it's about. We had intended that we would wait until Mark got back from SHOT and we would talk about his experiences there and some other stuff. But lately, there's been some things burning at the top of my mind that I really wanted to get out to you guys. And I think it's important. And it really dovetails in with the last conversation that we had on the episode. And if you'll remember, when we did that talk between Jordan Linscheid and myself, we kind of talked about the fact that, you know, it's probably good for Mark not to be present during things that are more political or activism related. It's not because Mark's not a supporter of the Second Amendment. Nothing could be further from the truth. He absolutely is. It's just that, you know, as a small business owner and also in some of his other business dealings, it's pretty important for Mark to at least be able to have some plausible deniability and seem somewhat impartial to things and you know, not be on the record. So anyway, that's what that's all about. It's not that Mark's not a Second Amendment patriot. Absolutely the guy is. But you know, for his sake, we tend to have these conversations when he's not around. So again, Mark's out in Vegas. I'm in Tennessee. We've got several states of separation between us and a whole lot of jealousy, for me not being there with him. But anyway, here's what we're going to go into. So if I were going to entitle this episode, I would entitle it this: Make 2019 the year that Slactivism dies. And what I mean about that is I want to talk about how we as gun owners need to individually and personally be leading the charge to protect, preserve, and further the causes of the Second Amendment. And I'm thinking about this as a New Year's resolution for myself. And I hope that maybe some of you or all of you would join me in that. I want to say on the front that I'm not trying to be preachy or lecture anyone with this talk. I'm talking to myself here as much as I am to anyone else. This is something that I am going to try to be more diligent about this year. And hopefully this will resonate with some of you guys as well. So, slactivism, what do I mean? I did a quick search on the internet because that's where you go to search for things anymore. And slactivism is defined as being a noun, and it's the practice of supporting a political or social cause by means such as social media or online petitions. And it's characterized as involving very little effort or commitment. And now that sounds a little derogatory, right? And when you start making derogatory comments, especially about us as a gun-owning community, I want to be very careful. Again, this is as much me speaking to myself and just sharing with you some of my convictions about this in the year ahead, as it is about trying to convince anybody else to join me, right? But slactivism is definitely, it's a pejorative term, and it's really trying to conceptualize a feel-good measure that supports an issue or a social cause. And, Wikipedia actually goes a bit further. And they say that it's showing support for a cause with the main purpose being boosting the ego of the participants in the movement. And I don't think that any of us necessarily support Second Amendment causes and trying to further the Second Amendment because it makes us feel good about ourselves, nor do we align with any organizations or entities that are advocates of the Second Amendment for those purposes, right? We find ourselves aligning with these organizations because we truly want to see change. We truly want to impart change, positive change for the Second Amendment community. But what I see as being a little bit of slactivism in what we're doing and the approach that a lot of us has taken over the past few years is what I'm actually going to call outsourcing the evangelism, or outsourcing the protection, or outsourcing our personal responsibilities, or what should be our personal responsibilities, because it's easy to do and because these big organizations make it appealing to us. And so if you'll bear with me for just a few minutes, we'll talk about this and we'll see how long this episode goes. I really don't have a time limit in mind. It might be kind of a short one, but anyway. So let me tell you a little bit about my experiences with organizing things. So some of you have listened to the podcast before and have heard me talk about some of my other hobbies and interests, and maybe equal to my love for firearms has historically been my love for cars. And it's kind of a toss up. Which of those two things did I have magazines and posters and things like that on my wall of as a kid first? Was it guns or was it cars? I really couldn't tell you. I think it was both. Maybe it was, a combination of the two somehow, right? But these things have been passions of mine for a very long while. And currently, my car of choice, my fascination, where I'm spending my money, if it's not on guns and things like that, has been building up a fairly new Toyota 4Runner for off-road overlanding, if you will, style travel with my family and I. And I'm looking at that kind of as an adventure vehicle. Not really, it's not as much about the vehicle as I hope it's about the places and the experiences that it will take us to that we can share with my kids. But several years ago, I was a Jeep owner. And interesting note, Mark and I discovered just in conversation sometime over the past few months that we both had backgrounds in the Jeep community, which it's kind of interesting. I'd be interested in hearing from some of you guys and ladies out there. How many of you have had similar experiences where, you were a Jeep owner, or maybe you still are, and a gun owner? Because those two things tend to go kind of hand in hand. And I think it has a lot to do with freedom. I think it has a lot to do with sufficiency and the desire to just get out and explore everything that this country of ours has to offer. And some of that freedom leans towards firearms, and some of that freedom leans towards, a vehicle that'll take you to great places and to great experiences, right? But I would say that this was circa 2012, 2013. My wife and I got very much involved in the Jeep community, and so much so that I started a very active local group of Jeep owners in my home state of Tennessee. And it was a lot of fun, right? We had organized events, organized trail rides. We got together in restaurant parking lots and invaded entire restaurants, took them over. And it was just a lot of fun meeting other people, checking out what they were doing with their vehicles, sharing stories, making friends, and then going out and experiencing things together, on trail rides and stuff like that. In the course of doing that, it seemed like almost inevitably, if you're part of a car club or a motorcycle club or any sort of vehicle centric club, a very popular thing to do is to organize charity fundraisers or charity events. And as the organizers of the group, we were kind of at the center point of organizing these charity events. And what I experienced there was kind of eye-opening. And I feel like maybe there's a bit of a parallel in a way to the Second Amendment community. So just bear with me, if you will. In our experience with the Jeep group, we discovered that everybody wanted an easy way to do something for the cause, whatever the cause was. 1 year we supported Toys for Tots, the Marine Corps program that puts toys in very deserving children's hands during the holidays, children that might not otherwise get gifts and things like that. 1 year we supported a local no-kill animal shelter, and that was super rewarding as well. So everybody wants to do something for the cause, but my experience was people wanted the easy way to do it. Unfortunately, very few people want to roll up their sleeves and put it all together. What we found was that folks wanted to show up on the day of the event. They wanted to get in, donate, and get out. Even fewer people wanted to stick around and do the tear down or the cleanup after the event, right? And so at least my impression from that experience was that donations are more popular than effort when you're talking about supporting a cause. It's pretty easy for most folks to give money. Granted, to varying degrees. Some folks give a lot, some folks give what they can. It's never about who gave what or how much, but it seemed like money was far easier to get contributed to the cause than time or effort. But strangely enough, and I think any of you that have ever volunteered your own time or effort to an event of any sort, you'll probably understand what I mean when I say that the reward is generally greater if you give of yourself and of your time and your talents and your effort than it is of giving money. I can sign a check for $5 pretty easy, or I can drop a $5 bill in an offering kettle pretty easily. For me to take time out of my day and rake leaves or clean up the house or the yard of an elderly person that can't do that on their own as part of a charity event, that's a little bit more difficult. That's time. Time is valuable. I get that, but it's time out of my schedule and away from my family and away from other things I might want to be doing. And it's sweat, and it's, it could be blood, if you're clumsy with tools like I can be at times. So again, it just seems like it's easier to give money than it is to give of time and effort. So what I experienced there was interesting. It was educational. I had to learn to curb my expectations, and I also had to learn to be extremely appreciative and supportive of the people who would give of their time and their talents and their energy. Perhaps a little bit more so than just the folks that wanted to donate a few bucks here and there. So how does that have anything to do with the Second Amendment community, right? I'm going to pose that I personally have seen some of the same things within the Second Amendment community, unfortunately. Maybe there's a little bit of a slight twist. When it comes to individual memberships, when you think about an organization such as the NRA, there seem to be two types of NRA members. The first one is the casual shooter or sportsman or sportswoman who believes that the NRA does good things for the sport and the 2A community, but maybe they're not much of an activist at heart. They probably had a parent or a grandparent or several generations of who were NRA members. And, it's just part of their family's DNA now to join the organization, to support it. Maybe they have a life membership or an endowment membership. And, they're happy to do that. And they believe that, the NRA does great things for hunters and shooters and, child education with firearms and things like that. And undeniably, it does. And they're right about those things. I think you also have a second type of NRA member. And that person is perhaps more activist minded. They're a shooter who maybe does all of the above, but they also want to support the NRA as a way to fund political activism. These are the folks that pay keen attention to what the NRA's lobbying arm, the NRA Institute for Legislative Action, or NRA ILA as it's known, they pay attention to what it's doing, and they hopefully add their own signature to NRA-driven petitions. And maybe they're the same folks that they're going to be sure that they click a link and they fill out a form letter that goes out to their political representatives when the NRA ILA tells them, hey, you need to make contact. And that's great. That's good. So again, two different, very broad categories of members, not just in the NRA, but in any Second Amendment community or organization, supporting the Second Amendment cause. So my observation has been that these big organizations encourage us to join them, pay our dues, and outsource activism to them. And if we're lucky, they provide resources for us to use for individual activism. They provide resources for us to use for political activism, contacting our representatives, contacting, the politicians that serve our state or our local municipality. And they also provide some resources for us to use for community outreach activism. And those are just things like speaking points that help us maybe break the ice and have conversations with folks that maybe they're staunchly anti-gun, or maybe they're kind of on the fence, but these organizations try to provide us, those tools to use for individual activism. These big organizations also are good mechanisms, or they provide good mechanisms for form letters to politicians. I mentioned that a minute ago. If you're a member of any of these organizations, the NRA, the GOA, the 2AF, et cetera, you've probably received the email broadcast that says, hey, click now. You must take action now. Let your representatives know. Contact your senators and your congressmen, and let them know what your opinion is on the bump stock ban or the red flag laws or any myriad of other things that are going on, some of which are very specific to individual states. And so that's good, right? You want that notification and that impetus and that easy way to do that. But again, we're kind of outsourcing our activism because I have to believe, and I base this only on my own experiences reading a ton of email every week for work, that I pay more attention to the stuff that is personal and is different and it varies in content and structure and wording of the message and includes a person's personal anecdotes and feelings on things than I do seeing the exact same email come through 20, 30, 100 times, and all that's changed is the sender's name, street address, contact information, things like that, right? So these big organizations at a base level, they promise to represent us as a special interest group, which we are, and they perhaps promise to lobby on our behalf or file amicus briefs and maybe, just maybe, act on our behalf in litigation. But again, we're essentially outsourcing our activism to them and paying them a small fee every year to do that. And unfortunately, I think a lot of us in the Second Amendment community, myself included in years past, kind of look at that and say, okay, well, I did my part. And I think that we could do more. And that's why I want to make 2019 the year that slacktivism dies for me personally, and hopefully for you all as well, or would encourage you to pick that up. So what am I saying here? What I'm saying is that we really need to get involved individually. Yes, we need to support the big organizations like the NRA, but we need to do so at a level that allows us to vote and steer them in the right direction. Jordan and I talked about that last episode. I know there's a lot of folks out there in the 2A community, especially the more politically minded folks, that are unhappy with the NRA. If you've paid any attention to the news over the past few months, you saw Wayne LaPierre and Chris Cox essentially volunteer the NRA to support the bump stock ban if President Trump so desired such a thing. And chicken or egg, which came first? Did Trump go ahead and instruct his people to pursue that, or first, and then they fell in? The NRA sort of added its voice and support to it after the fact, or did he do that spurred on by their comments first? I don't know really. I've looked, I've researched. The timing, it's kind of nebulous. I think that we can all agree that it didn't help, regardless of what the timing was, when the NRA basically threw that out there as a sacrificial lamb to take heat off of other things. So the way to fix that is not to be so pissed off at the NRA that you cancel your membership. The way to fix that and address that and keep that from happening in the future, if that's what you desire, is to ensure that you have a level of membership high enough that allows you to vote. And so the NRA has very specific requirements on who can vote. And so what's required to vote in the NRA Board of Directors elections? And as of 2018, the following were the requirements. Any person that has a life membership at any level, any annual member with a minimum of 5 consecutive years of current membership, and this one's kind of fun, but those who make a large enough donation. And so it's interesting that the source that I found online said that the statistics were that the number three, those that had the largest donations are the ones that vote the most times, which I guess makes sense. If you think about it, if you've made significant contributions financially to the NRA over a course of years, you're probably pretty invested in the whole organization, and you're going to care enough about it to vote. But again, those other two, a life member at any level or any member with a minimum of 5 consecutive years of current membership, that's 5 years of annual membership, consecutive years. It can't be broken up. You can't have done 2, skipped a couple years, come back in and done another 3. That doesn't count. It's 5 consecutive. That allows you to vote for the board of directors. That's how we get change to occur in the NRA if we want to fix it, right? So yes, get involved from that perspective. Also, yes, support the smaller organizations, national level and state level. By that, I'm thinking about the Firearms Policy Coalition first and foremost for me, and then the Gun Owners of America, and then the Second Amendment Foundation. Adam Kraut of the Legal Brief and the Gun Collective and Prince Law Firm has some statements on record recently where he was talking about what he does is he looks to see who's doing the most for you, for your money. And for him, he pointed out the Firearms Policy Coalition. I did some research after that, and I see where they are as well. They're out there leading the charge in court in cases that are trying to chip away at some of the gross overbearance of government against the Second Amendment in states like California and so forth. And they're also taking the federal government to task too. So I'm more than happy to throw my money in behind organizations like that. Personally, I'm more than willing to throw my money in behind organizations that are actually out there doing something for us. The GOA 2AF Again, maybe they're doing more like the amicus briefs and things like that, which is still very important, but I'm not sure, by looking what their track record is successfully in leading the charge on various lawsuits to get rights back for people that have had rights taken away from them. So 800-pound gorilla in the room is still the NRA. I still support them, and I will continue to do so, and will continue to vote for change in the board of directors. But then I'm choosing to take maybe more of my money that previously I would have given to the big gorilla, and I'm sending it to the smaller guys because they seem to be doing more and they're more efficient and more effective with it. But finally, the other thing that I think we need to do as a community to get involved is make sure that whoever you support is effective, right? Don't throw that money away. So spend it where it's the most effective. For you and your state, it might be a local level organization. Some states have very vocal, active lobbying entities that are fighting for state rights for gun owners. And, if that's you and you're in a state that has that, please, by all means, get in behind them and support them. Support them financially, support them by donating time. Whatever you can. Sometimes it's just, can you take a call list and make some phone calls and reach out to potential donors or past donors and thank them for their contributions and ask them for more? Or can you make some phone calls or lick envelopes and, slap stamps on them to get things out in the mail to let folks know that, these issues are up for discussion in the state legislatures. And it's just pretty easy, rewarding, but roll up your sleeves and get involved kind of work. More importantly, I think that we need to personally and individually take on the work that we're outsourcing. I'm not saying take it back, right? I'm not saying to take it back from those big organizations and say, you guys aren't capable of doing this at a successful enough level. We're going to take it back and we're going to do it all, ourselves. We need them. We need those organizations. But what I'm saying is, add your shoulder to the weight, push against it yourself, roll up your sleeves, get in there, help, do the things like I just mentioned, the fundraisers and the awareness campaigns and things like that. But get, put your own momentum behind it and help push these things across the finish line. You can also get involved by personally emailing, writing, calling, and even visiting your elected representatives. Do that. I looked at the stats before I started recording tonight, and in 2018 there were 39 gubernatorial elections in the United States. That was 36 states and 3 territories that changed governors. Statistically, Democrats gained control of 9 governorships that had previously been held by Republicans and an independent. Republicans gained control of 1, and that was Alaska, and that was previously held by an independent. So I don't want to get into the conversation of party lines and voting according party lines and, Democrats are all liberals and they all hate guns and things like that. I'm going to be honest with you. I live in Tennessee. I've got Democrat friends that vote against my wishes on a lot of other issues, social issues, perhaps fiscal issues, perhaps, but they vote very much with me on Second Amendment. So it's entirely possible for liberal Democrats to be gun owners and to value the Second Amendment, folks. Don't paint with big brush strokes, right? But you do have to look at what the party is doing at a representative level and at the governing level. And if the party itself is aligned against you on the matters, the issues that you care about, such as the Second Amendment in the case of our discussion tonight, then the choice is pretty clear. I can get along very well with my Democrat friends, but I can absolutely vote against their candidate of choice because their candidate wants to see my rights limited, and that doesn't resonate with me. So, for my friends that are of a different political leaning, we'll shake hands, we'll pat each other on the back. We may not post a whole lot on each other's Facebook walls and things like that during an election cycle, but it's not about them personally, but I am definitely of the mindset to try to keep their candidate out of office if their candidate is going to erode my freedoms. So anyway, that's how it kind of shakes down for me. But also make gun ownership normal. And I think I've talked about this in the past. I think that we need to, in 2019, take back the normalcy that's been stolen from us by the media and the anti-gun crowd. Here's how I would do that, right? Mention it casually in conversation with mixed company. Talk about a class you've taken or a day at the range or a date night at the range. If your circle of friends is like my circle of friends, you got folks that love guns, shoot guns because you're attracted, birds of a feather, we're going to flock together. But you've probably got friends in your circle that don't have any interest in it, or maybe they haven't vocalized it. You don't know what their interest level is, so we don't talk about it. I have sometimes caught myself thinking about broaching the subject in mixed company, and I've backed away from it. And I'll be honest, sometimes it's just, I don't want to get into an argument with my friends, right? Ignorance is bliss. We can talk about the things that our kids are involved in, sports, school, the weather, the latest developments in the neighborhood. Hey, so-and-so, do you see that new, the new car that they got or something like that, right? There's 1,000 things that we can talk about that aren't divisive. So we steer away from them. I do personally. And I don't mention guns because I feel like, from their perspective, they might look at me, give me the stink eye, almost like I looked at them and said, one of my hobbies is pornography or, drinking until I can't stand up. Those are extremes, right? But no one in their right mind would go brag about those two things. It's socially unacceptable to say, yeah, I'm into those terrible things like that. But I feel the same way sometimes when I'm in mixed company and want to talk about guns. You've probably all seen the meme, the guy that's sitting alone on a swing and he's kind of staring at his shoes and he's all sad. And it's, it says me at a party when nobody wants to talk about guns. And man, that's me. And I'm sure it's been some of you guys too that, I just don't talk about it. And it's because, again, I feel like that normalcy has been stolen by the media and by the anti-gun movement that I have to feel somewhat, sad or ashamed about my interests when, frankly, I think nothing's further from the truth. So I've started experimenting with that, and I've started mentioning it more in mixed company, and the results have mostly been positive. I've not had anyone yet just look at me and say, we're not going to talk about guns. We don't talk about that stuff. If they had questions, they asked. And, it's even led to a few questions from people that wanted to maybe go to the range because they're curious and they've never tried it before. Another way you could do that is brag on your child's first hunting experience. If you live in an area where hunting is popular, it seems to make it safe when you talk about your kids because everybody loves kids. They've got kids. You got kids. We all love talking about our kids. So, if little Johnny or little Susie have gone out and they went on a hunting trip, deer hunting or duck or whatever happens to be in season, and it was their first time to harvest an animal that is either going to be used by the family for food or donated to somebody who needs it for food. That's an exciting thing, and it's a chance to brag on your kids, and that might open a door to talk about it in a way that seems safe. Brown rifles are often a lot more safe and to talk about mixed company than black rifles are for some reason. And we all know why. It's kind of the media stealing the normalcy from it. But again, I've found that you can talk about these things in mixed company. And even if somebody is on the fringe or skeptical or maybe even opposed, when you're talking about your kids and very mature, safe, responsible firearms use, and it's a bit of a heritage discussion. Sometimes it softens up the edges and people are willing to talk to you about something that they might not normally talk about. You can also use the opportunity to talk about how you're taking personal responsibility for your protection and safety or for that of your family. This one's interesting. You can actually share personal hard-won stories. And I know for some of you listening, that might be hard to do. especially if your reason for being armed yourself is very personal. You may have gone through an experience that you don't want to talk about and that people don't talk about in polite conversations, and it might be difficult. But I'll say this, when the time's right for you to do that, and you'll know when that is, it might also be a little bit therapeutic to share your story with other people. If you've got a story like that, you've probably come to terms with the reality of the fact that the police cannot be everywhere all the time. And if you could carry a police officer in your pocket, you would, but you can't. So you've chosen another means of protecting yourself, and it's a firearm. Sometimes those conversations, those very real, raw conversations, break down barriers, mental barriers with other people that you otherwise couldn't get past. I've seen it personally. I've shared personal stories. I've been with people who have shared extraordinarily personal stories of loss of a spouse who was gunned down in front of them. And they vowed that they would never be that defenseless and that helpless again ever in their life. And I tell you that the other side listening, even if they're very anti, I've seen how hard it is for them to formulate a counter to that. It's very hard to look at a widow in the eyes and tell her, you shouldn't have a gun. Guns are terrible. Guns are, these evil tools of death and destruction. They can't look at her while she's got tears running on her face and she's bearing her soul to them and saying, I saw my husband shot in front of me in cold blood and I could do nothing to save him. If only I had had a gun, I could have made a difference. They cannot formulate much of a counter to that that's not completely full of crap, right? I mean, and some people are going to. They're still going to argue because they would argue with you about water being wet. And that's unfortunate. You'll never reach those people. It's going to take them going through their own experience for it to make sense and be real to them. But other than the hardened people that have hard hearts and closed minds and closed ears, most anybody will at least listen and say, I don't understand where you're coming from. I can't relate personally, but I see the pain and I hear what you're saying. And logically it makes sense, even though I'm having a hard time rationalizing it. And so if you're willing to share a story like that, again, when the time's right, I think you'll find that that's a very powerful tool that the other side really doesn't have much of an answer to, other than just to listen and try to empathize. Maybe on a lighter note, another tactic, and we've talked about this before, offer to take friends and family shooting. Offer to take that anti-gun person, to the shooting range. And do this. Promise them that you'll leave politics out of the conversation entirely until they want to talk about it. Tell them it's a no holds barred, no conditions, no funny business. Go to the range and see what you think about it. If they push back, I have no desire to have guns, I'm scared of guns, that's fine. But, if you're going to be against it, why don't you at least experience it once, just once, and then tell me what you think. And at least then they can argue against it from a position of some exposure and some experience. John Lovell over at Warrior Poet Society did a video on this recently where he took a visiting Australian citizen who classified herself as very much quote unquote anti-gun. He took her shooting at a range and he made it very safe and enjoyable for her. I would encourage you to look for that on his YouTube channel. I think he's got it entitled Anti-Gun Range Fun. And I don't want to completely spoil it for you, but at the end of the episode, the Australian citizen that he took shooting had a smile from ear to ear, and she was still a little scared and a little intimidated by it, but she had a blast. And I think that if we would take a moment and leave the politics and the evangelism and the proselytizing out of the picture and take our friends and say, look, I will provide, a gun. I'll provide the ammo. I will be there every step of the way to help you hold it and use it and operate it safely. You can do it as few times or as many times as you want. And maybe even vow, I'll never tell anybody that we did this unless you want me to. and just give them that safe option to go experience it for themselves. You might just change an anti-gun person's opinion on firearms. They might experience how much fun it is, and they might experience for themselves just how a tool, an implement, a firearm cannot possibly embody good or evil, that it's entirely up to the person behind the trigger to aim it and pull the trigger. They might experience that for themselves, and then you might start them on a journey towards changing their mind, changing their thought. So you can lead a horse to water. You can't make it drink, but you can sometimes lead that horse to water. And I would encourage you to do that. I personally am going to try to do that more in 2019. As a matter of fact, all the things I've talked about, I'm going to make part of my New Year's resolutions as a gun owner and as an advocate for the Second Amendment to end slactivism and be more active, rolling up my sleeves and getting involved. And I will try to make a commitment to myself and to you all that at least once a quarter, that's once every 3 months, I will email my representatives, including my governor, and just let them know, hey, I'm still here. I'm still one of your constituents, and the Second Amendment is still important to me, and I want that to be preserved for my kids and their kids for generations to come, and I need your help, Mr. Politician, to ensure that that happens. So I would ask you to join me. Join me in being the change that you want to see in the Second Amendment community. Let's commit to each other to put in the work to preserve this legacy of freedom that could easily be one generation away from extinction. And I think if you really pay attention to what's going on in the news these days and the intensity with which the anti-gun political machine and the anti-gun politicians are ramping up their efforts already in January of 2019, you'll agree that it's a possibility. It's very possible that we will see a major offensive mounted against the Second Amendment and against gun owners this year. And it could completely change the landscape of freedoms that our kids get to enjoy 10, 20, 40 years from now. So folks, that's it. It's a short episode. Again, a lot of me talking. I'm going to stop here in just a moment. I'm going to enjoy a drink. I'm going to sit back. I'm going to package this podcast up and get it out to you all. Kind of bizarre releasing one on a Wednesday morning, but like I said, I wanted to get something out there, and I felt like this was a great opportunity to have this conversation while Mark was at SHOT Show and enjoying himself. Want to mention also special thanks to our patrons who directly support the show and make the future or are making future episodes possible. If you want to support the show, you can do that by visiting shootersnation.com and look for the donate button. Also, be sure to visit shootersnation.com after the show and look for the idea link. Give us your feedback. Let us know how we're doing. We've gotten a lot of good feedback lately. We've had folks reaching out to us on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, over on shootersnation.com on our own forum that we set up. If you haven't signed up for that yet, please go do that before you do anything else after the podcast. It's free. And that's a place for us all to meet together without being on Facebook, without being on Instagram. The only person that controls that social media, that's us. And trust me, we're not gonna change our minds and decide that gun related content's not related or not allowed anytime soon. So be sure to sign up for the forum over on shootersnation.com. Coming up next, I think we're going to hear on the next episode from Mark Lancaster back from SHOT Show. I'm going to talk to you all about my experiences with my shiny new FN 509 mid-size pistol. Spoiler alert, I freaking love that gun. Going to talk to you a little bit about my experiences with the new SIG P365. New to me, not new to everybody else, but I finally got on the wagon and picked one of those up. And I'm finally building another AR. And Mark, I think, will be happy to hear that. So come back with us next time. We'll get into all that and more. Until then, I hope you all are safe out there. We'll talk to you again soon.
The preceding segment was a production of the Shooters Nation podcast. Visit us online at shootersnation.com.